The town had died so long ago that even its ruin was quiet about it. She came into it up the old right-of-way in the middle of a dry, bright afternoon, the rails long lifted and the grade a straight bar of packed dust through the sage, and the town stood where the grade widened into what had been a yard, a scatter of gray wooden buildings sinking into the flat under an enormous pale sky. And she stopped at the edge of it, as she always stopped at the edge of such places, and gave it a long look before she went in. There was a street, or the ghost of one, false-fronted stores, with their windows gone and their doors hanging, a church with its steeple broken off at the shoulder, houses drowned to the sills in sage and rabbit brush, and all of it gone the same silver gray. The color a dead town turns when the paint has been gone 50 years and the sun has had the wood to itself, and nothing moved in the whole of it but the heat shimmering off the dust and a hawk turning high up in the pale blue. She had walked through dead towns before, plenty of them, and most were sad in a used-up way that made her keep walking. But this one had a stillness that was different, a held-breath quality, as though the town had not so much died as stopped, all at once, on a particular day, and was waiting still for that day to resume. She was 22 years old, and she carried the whole of what she owned on her back, 30 pounds of it, the folding knife and the matches in the bread bag, and the tin cup and the candle stub, and the soft notebook with the pencil, and a little under $9 folded in the back that she had not needed to spend in some days. She walked the ghost of the street in the dry heat, reading the town the way she read all such places, and the town told her its story in fragments. A hardware store with its shelving still ranked inside the dimness, tins on the shelves gone to rust lace, a spool of wire waiting 50 years for a hand, a house with a child's swing gone to gray rope and silver board hanging dead still from a dead, cottonwood, a barber shop with its chair standing in the dim like a throne, its mirror gone blind with dust, a schoolhouse with the alphabet still marching faint across the top of a blackboard no one had washed since the last day of some last term. It had been a wheat town, she thought, a rail town, one of the thousands the lines had called into being across the dry country, and then let die when the lines died, and it had not been a poor town or a failed one. The buildings were good. The street was wide. The church had been proud before its steeple broke. It had been a town that worked, and it had been killed anyway. By nothing it did. By the closing of a railroad it had trusted the way you trust the sun to rise, and there was something in that which she felt in her chest as she walked it, the unfairness that was not even unfairness, only the way of things, the great slow tide that had made the town and unmade it, and did not know the town existed. And painted on the flank of the tallest building, in letters the sun had almost but not quite taken, a name and under it a date, and the date was what stopped her, because it was not old the way the town felt old. The town felt like the far side of a century. The date was 1961. It was the depot that held the answer, because it was the depot the town had lived and died by. It stood at the head of the yard where the grade ran through, a long, low station building with wide eaves and a bay window that had watched the trains, and it was the soundest building in the town, built by the railroad to railroad standards, its roof holding, its walls true. And she went to it through the heat and stood on the warped boards of its platform and looked in through the bay window at the office inside, at the telegraph desk, and the ticket window, and the waybill racks all standing in the dim, furred with dust, and on the wall, a calendar. She could read it through the glass. The calendar said 1961, and it was open to a month, and a day in the month was circled, and she stood on the hot, silent platform with the hawk turning over the dead town and understood that she was looking at the day the town had stopped, that on that circled day the last train had run, and the line had closed, and the town had ended, and that someone had circled the day, and no one had ever turned the page. The depot doors were shut but not locked. She went in through the office door into the hot, dim stillness, the dust rising in the light behind her, and everything was as the last day had left it, the chair pushed back from the telegraph desk, the ticket window shutter drawn down and latched, a coffee cup on the sill with a brown fossil stain in its bottom. The train register open on the counter to its last page with its last entry, a pen laid across it as though the hand had only just set it down, and she moved through it slow and careful, touching nothing, because the room did not feel abandoned. It felt kept, and she had learned the difference in a dozen places, the felt presence of an ordering hand long after the hand was gone. There was no dust of ruin here, no leaves blown in, no pack rat middens, no bird nests in the rafters. The windows were whole, and the door had been shut snug. And under the soft gray film of the years the room was in order, squared away, everything in its place the way a person leaves a room they mean to honor rather than a room they are fleeing. The way a ship's cabin is left by a good officer going ashore for the last time, and she stood in the middle of it and turned slowly and thought, this room was closed, not left. Someone had made this room ready for its own long stillness, had squared it and shut it the way you compose a face, and had meant it to be found so, someday, by someone. And to say to that someone what it was saying now to her, that the town had ended in order and not in flight, that it had been loved to the last hour. And then she began to look for the way down. Because a depot has a cellar, a freight cellar or a record vault, under the office where the railroad kept its books safe from fire. And if the room above had been closed like a coffin lid then, the room below was where the town's heart would be, and she had come to be a good reader of buried hearts. She found it under the freight room floor, a heavy trap in the boards, and under the trap a steep stair going down into cool dark air, and at the bottom of the stair, set in a frame of brick, a door. It was an iron door, a vault door, the fireproof kind the railroad set on their record rooms, heavy as a safe's and hung to swing shut of its own weight, and it stood open, held open, chalked open by an iron wedge driven under its edge, and its handle was worn bright in the middle of the old paint by a hand that had used it, and on the door, painted in neat station agent lettering gone soft with the years, was a single line, sealed June 1961. And under the lettering, smaller, in the same neat hand, opened for you, whoever you are. She stood on the cool stair a long moment with her candle throwing the light on those two lines, the sealed and the opened, and the wedge under the door, and she understood that she had been expected. Not she herself, but someone, some day, and that the door had been left chalked open against that some day. And she stepped over the sill and into the cellar, and she was not the first, and the first had wanted her to come. The cellar was the record vault of the depot, and it had been made a home, and it had been made something more than a home, and she saw the more before she saw the home, because the more was everywhere. The vault was one long brick room, cool and bone-dry, the dry of a sealed room in dry country, the best preserved place she had ever stood in, and along one whole wall. On the deep shelving built for the railroad's books, the town was kept. Not the railroad's records only, though they were there, the ledgers and the waybills and the train registers, but the town, photographs in ranks, faces and weddings and threshing crews, and the street full of wagons and then full of automobiles, a school bell, a postmaster's date stamp, hymnals from the broken steepled church, jars of buttons and thimbles and marbles, letters tied in bundles, a wedding dress folded in paper, the small, precious freight of a whole town's life, gathered and ranked and labeled in the neat station agent hand, each shelf with its card, each card with its names. She walked the shelves slowly with the candle, reading the cards, and the town that had been silver-gray silence above her filled up with people as she walked. Here were the family from the house with the swing, named, the child on the swing named, laughing at a camera on some bright dead afternoon. Here was the barber in his doorway with his arms folded. Here was the church with its steeple hole and a wedding on its steps. Here was the whole street on some celebration day, flags out, wagons ranked, faces crowded at every window, alive, all of them, held alive in the cool dark under their own dead town. It was a museum, she understood, standing there with her candle. A museum no one would ever visit, the whole memory of a dead town carried down into the one fireproof room in it, and sealed against the years, by someone who could not save the town but would not let it be forgotten. And the date on the door was not a death date but a preserving date, the day the keeping began. And at the far end of the vault, past the shelves of the town, was the home, a bed, a table, a stool, a small stove whose pipe ran up through the brick into the depot's chimney above, shelves of plain living, a lantern, all of it squared away in the same neat order, and on the table, weighted under the depot's own brass ticket dater, there was a book, and she took it up and read it, because the book was the kindness, and the book was the rule, and she had learned in 8 hard places never to sleep in a stranger's house without first reading the thing the stranger left to be read. She had been the station agent, the last one, and she had run the depot for the town's last 20 years and kept its vault for 30 more. She wrote of it in the neat lettering hand of the door and the shelf cards, and the shape that came up out of the pages was the shape of the town itself. Because the agent's life and the town's life had been one thing, the trains that were the town's blood, the wheat out and the goods in, the depot platform that was the town's front porch, every arrival and departure and death and homecoming passing through her office, the tickets she had sold for weddings and for funerals and for leavings that broke her heart, 40 years of the town's whole traffic moving across her desk. She wrote of the town in its good years with a plainness that was its own kind of love. The harvest weeks when the elevator ran day and night and the sidings were full. The excursion trains that took the whole town to the fair. The platform on summer evenings when people came down just to watch the express go through. The way the town set its clocks by her trains and its heart by its town. And the drifter girl, reading, could hear it. The living town above her head, the boots on the platform boards, 50 years gone. And then, the line dying by degrees, the trains fewer, the young people's tickets all one way, the elevator closing, the stores closing, until the day came, the circled day, when the last train ran and she worked her last shift and closed the office and the town. She wrote, did not die that day, it had been dying for years, but that day it stopped, and everyone left who was going to leave, and the few who stayed grew old and were carried out one by one, and she stayed longest of all, because she could not. She wrote, leave the town to be picked over and scattered and forgotten, could not bear that all those lives should blow away like the paint off the boards, and so she had gathered the town, house by emptying house, gathered what the leaving people left and the dying people willed her, and carried it down into the one room in the county that fire could not take and rot could not reach, and sealed it there, and kept it, the agent of a station with no trains, keeping the freight of a town with no people, for no wage and no reason but that remembering was the thing she was. And she wrote about the door, because the door was the danger, and she set the rule apart in the middle of a page with a line ruled above and below the way they all did. The vault door is hung to swing shut and latch of itself, as a fire door must, and it will do it silent and fast if the wedge is kicked or the draft takes it. Chock it with the iron wedge every single time you pass, coming and going, no matter how brief, and if ever it shuts on you, do not spend your strength on the handle, for the handle will not open it from within. The release is the third brick up in the second course left of the frame. Loose, and behind it the latch rod, pull it toward you and keep a candle burning in the vault always. And watch it. For the room is sealed and the air is only what you bring in with you, and when the flame sinks low and blue, the air is spending and you must go up. The drifter girl read that 3 times, and she went to the door and found the iron wedge and understood the whole terrible sense of it. A fireproof room being an airproof room. A door built to save the records from fire, being a door that would happily seal a living person from the air, hung heavy on purpose to slam itself, because that was its work, its one design, to shut against the fire without waiting for a hand, and it did not know the fire was never coming, and never would. The door would go on trying to seal the vault forever, patient as gravity, and every day of living behind it was a day of living with a thing that wanted, in its dumb iron way, to close on you. It was of a piece with all of them, she thought, the dangers of the kept places, the crane that wanted to roll, and the bridge that the wind could walk, and the door that wanted to shut, the keepers had all lived with a thing that wanted to kill them, not from malice but from design, from being exactly what it was, and had made their peace with it not by disarming it. For it could not be disarmed and still be itself, but by discipline, the wedge, the clamp, the latch, the small unfailing right that let a person and a dangerous thing share a house for 40 years. She found the third brick up in the second course left of the frame, and worked it loose, and saw the latch rod behind it, the agent's own cut in release, made because the agent had lived down here behind a door that wanted to shut on her, and had made herself a way out, and in making it had made it for whoever came after. And the drifter girl put the brick back loose the way she had found it, and stood a moment with her hand flat on the cool iron of the door, the sealed June 1961, and the open for you, whoever you are, and felt the two lines hold each other the way they had held each other on the paint for 30 years, the sealing and the welcome, the shut door and the way through it. She marked the rule. She chalked the wedge firm under the open door and checked it, and she kept her candle burning on the table as the rule said, and she went to her bed that first night in the coolest, stillest room she had ever slept in. The whole memory of a town ranked on the shelves beside her, and she slept, and the candle burned tall and easy all night on the good air coming down the open stair. Because the wedge was set, and the rule was kept. The door shut on her on the 11th day, and it was the wind that did it. The wind and one moment of her own carelessness, and the rule was the whole of why she lived. A dry storm had come up out of the west that afternoon, no rain in it, only wind, a hot, hard dust wind that had the ghost town moaning and clattering, loose boards going, the church bell tolling itself in the broken steeple, and the wind got into the depot through some doors she had left unlatched above and came down the cellar stair in gusts, and she was going up and down that afternoon carrying. Because she had found in one of the houses a box of photographs the agent had somehow missed under a floor, and she was bringing them down to the vault where they belonged, and on the last trip, her arms full of the box, hurrying because the storm was worsening, she stepped over the sill, and her boot caught the iron wedge, and kicked it, skittering, out from under the door. And she heard it go, and understood what it meant, and had half turned, the box still in her arms, when the draft took the door. It went as the rule said it would go, silent and fast, the whole heavy iron of it swinging smooth on its hinges, and shutting with a soft enormous chunk that she felt in the floor, and the latch fell, and the vault was sealed, and she was inside it. She stood very still in the candlelit vault with the box of photographs in her arms and the door shut before her, and let the first wave of it pass through her, the animal scrabble of sealed-in that she had felt under the turntable and knew now for what it was, a wave, a thing that passed if you stood still and let it, and she stood still and let it, and then she set the box down on the table, squared, the way the agent would have set it, and she turned to the work. Because the fear was not the work was the rule, and the rule was 3 parts, and she took them in order, the way a person takes a procedure. First the handle, which was, to say not the handle, she did not touch it, because the rule said the handle would not open it from within, and she did not spend strength on things the rule had already spent 30 years learning were useless, and there was a discipline even in that, in walking past the great obvious lever of her fear to the small hidden thing that would actually serve. Second the candle, she looked at it, tall and steady on the table, plenty of air, hours of air by the burn of it, and she made herself take that in, that the room was large and the air was long, and the door had been shut 2 minutes and not 2 days, that the candle was her clock, and the clock said there was time to do the thing right. And third the brick. She took the candle to the frame, and she counted, 3rd brick up, 2nd course left, and the brick was there, and she worked her fingers into the old mortar seams, and the brick came loose, grating, into her hand, and behind it, in the dark slot, cool to her fingers, was the latch rod, iron, waiting. 30 years waiting, and she got her 2 fingers hooked on it and pulled it toward her. And there was a moment, one long, terrible moment, when it did not move. 30 years of stillness in it, and she watched the candle flame steady and tall on the table. Plenty of air, hours of air. No cause yet for any fear the rule had not already answered. And she took a breath and worked the rod, easing it, coaxing it the way she had learned in 9 places to coax stuck iron, side to side. Small, patient, and it broke its rust with a snap she felt up her arm, and slid, and in the door the latch lifted, and the great iron door swung open at the push of her shoulder, and the storm air of the stairwell came in cool over her, and she stood in the open doorway, with the latch rod's cold still in her fingers, and did not shake. This time, hardly at all, and that was the strangest part. The not shaking, until she understood it, she had never really been trapped. That was what the agent had done for her, across 30 years with a loose brick and a ruled line, made it so the door could shut and it would not matter. Made the trap into a delay, a chore, a thing with a procedure. And a person with a procedure is a person spared the terror, and the terror is half of what kills. She fetched the wedge and chalked the door and checked it twice, and then she went and picked up the candle and looked at its tall, easy flame, her clock, her friend. And she laughed once, alone, in the doorway of the town's whole memory, alive. She took up her notebook that evening and wrote the rule first, before anything, the way she had come to do. Chalk the wedge every time, coming and going. If the door shuts, the release is the 3rd brick up, 2nd course left. Pull the rod toward you, watch the candle, and when it sinks, go up. She underlined it twice, and below it she wrote a 2nd line. She sealed the town in so it would not be forgotten, and cut herself a way out, and it was my way out too. She looked at that a while. Then she went on. The days took on a shape. She kept the vault, and she kept the depot above it, and she kept, because it could not be helped, the town. Because a person cannot live in the memory of a town without becoming its keeper, and she took up the agent's work where the agent had left it, the gathering. She walked the dead houses in the cool of the mornings, careful and reverent, and where the agent had missed things, under floors, behind walls, in the fallen sheds, she found them. The photographs and the letters and the small stubborn keepsakes of the gone lives, and she carried them down into the vault and gave them their places on the shelves and wrote their cards in her own hand under the agent's cards, and it became the work of her seasons, the completing of the museum no one would ever visit, and she found that it filled a place in her that none of the other keepings had quite reached, because the other keepings had been of machines and structures, of things, and this was a keeping of people, of faces and names and hands, a whole town of lives that would have blown away like paint off the boards, but for one woman's refusal, and now for hers. She read the shelves in the evenings by lantern light the way another person would read books, taking down a bundle of letters or a rank of photographs and learning the town family by family, and the dead town filled up with people for her. The street she walked was full of the faces from the shelves, the depot platform crowded with everyone who had ever waited on it, and she was less alone in that ghost town than she had been in most living ones, which she knew said a thing about her, and she let it say it. She chalked the wedge every time, coming and going, without fail, the rule a part of her hands now. She kept the candle burning in the vault and watched it as she watched the flame in the mine, her clock and her friend. She swept the depot office above and kept it squared as the agent had kept it, and she did not turn the calendar page, because the circled day was the town's day, and the town had a right to it, and she left untouched the small things that had been the agent's own. Out of the courtesy she paid all of them. She never learned the whole of her, but she came nearer with this one than with any of the others, because the agent had left not only her own ledger, but the whole town for context, and the drifter girl came to know her the way you know a person by their life's work, by the care in 10,000 shelf cards, by which things she had thought worth saving, which was everything, the buttons and the hymnals and the school bell, everything, and she thought that the station agent had been the greatest keeper of them all, because the others had each kept one thing, a hoist, or a light, or a shed, or a fire, and she had kept a whole town, every life in it, single-handed, underground, in the dark, for 30 years, against the one enemy none of the other keepers had fought, which was forgetting, and she had won. The town was not forgotten. Here it was, ranked and labeled and dry and safe, and a stranger had come at last down the years exactly as the agent had trusted one would, and had read the door, opened for you whoever you are, and had taken up the keeping, and the town would go on being remembered by somebody, which was all the agent had wanted, and was, the drifter girl was coming to believe, close to the whole of what anyone wanted. On an evening in the cool of the year she sat in the vault at the agent's table, with the lantern lit and the candle burning tall and easy beside it, and the agent's ledger closed under the brass ticket dater, and her own notebook open on her knee, the shelves of the town ranked away down the long brick room in the warm light, the door chalked firm on its wedge, the loose brick and the latch rod waiting behind their mortar seams against a need she did not expect and was ready for. She had spent the evening as she spent many evenings now, with the rank of the photographs learning faces, and she had found among them one she kept coming back to, a young woman in a station agent's coat standing on the depot platform beside a train, squinting into the sun, laughing at whoever held the camera, and the card beneath it in the neat hand said only the year and the words, "Myself, first week." And the drifter girl had sat a long while with the agent young and laughing in her hands, at the beginning of it all, before the circled day, before the 30 years in the vault, and had thought that this was the strangest gift of all the places had given her, to hold the keeper's own face, the only one of all of them she would ever see, and that the young woman laughing on the platform could not have known, that bright first week, that she would end as the keeper of the whole town's memory in a sealed room under her own depot, and would do it well, and would not be sorry. She was 22 years old. She had a folding knife, a box of matches, a tin cup, and a little under $9 she had not spent, and now had nowhere to spend and did not miss. She had a home in a sealed vault beneath a ghost town depot, cool and dry and safe, a stove and a lantern and a candle for a clock, a rule that had turned a trap into a chore, and the whole gathered memory of a town on the shelves around her, and a book she had not written full of the greatest keeper of them all. She turned to a fresh page and smoothed it flat with the side of her hand, and above her the dead town lay silver and silent under the enormous stars with all its lives kept safe beneath it, and the circled day on the depot calendar held its place the way it had held it since 1961, and she began to write. In the neat lettering hand she was learning from a station agent 30 years dead, the first line of the keeping of the only home she had ever made her own.